Hello, welcome to Keep It Dirty, a podcast where my guests share their why behind their personal story, living functionally through our ever changing environment, and how they are impacting our world locally and globally. I am your host, Leslie Dowling, a certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner and public speaker, helping companies jumpstart their path to increase revenue and productivity through restorative health techniques. And it is my pleasure to welcome my guest, Dr. Ilya Skolnikov, who is one of the foremost functional medicine experts. He is the clinical director of Triad of Health Family Healing Center and the international award-winning speaker, creator, and Amazon best-selling author of the Skolnikov Method, New Medicine for a New You, Inflammation Solutions Handbook. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Leslie. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Yep.
much. So what would be the best first thing to start talking about?
Wow. I mean, it's just you are a wealth of knowledge. And wow, where do I start? But let's start about um, really taking a deeper dive on the roller coaster ride of blood sugar. And when I educate people with brain gut health, trying to educate them of how those mood swings, those ups and downs, really wreak havoc on our system. And I'd love for you to speak into that.
Okay. Well, the best, I guess there's so many different ways of looking at blood sugar, and you'll have to bear with me because, my perspective is going to be the medical perspective. I can't help it.
Yeah.
That's my background. Uh, the lucky thing is that as a chiropractic kinesiologist, which is somebody who's specially skilled at diagnosing what are the underlying causes of people's health concerns, we like to figure out what's the cause. In other words, if you go to a medical doctor, they don't really care all their most of the time, unless they have extra specialized training. All they want to do is give you metformin or give you something like that, like some insulin or some kind of thing that's really powerful and strong that's going to imbalance your whole system, and then you're stuck taking this nasty poison. Okay, for want of a better term. So let's just go backwards for maybe a little bit more than 25 seconds here. If we're talking about any kind of healthcare, there's three causes of any health concern. There's the structural cause, meaning like if I were to, speak a little too fast, and then my wife gets angry with the way I'm talking to you, and then she throws a book at me, which she would never do. My wife is great. And then it hits me in the head and it's my own book. And then that causes me to have some problems with my head. That's a structural cause of a problem with my head, okay? Or a car accident or whatever. Then there's an emotional cause, like, why is my wife throwing a book at me? It's so disturbing. That's emotionally upsetting because I'm so in love and close to my wife. And then there's the chemical cause, which might be now that my head hurts, I'm not able to digest my food as well because instead of paying attention to the food I'm eating and chewing it properly and enjoying it, I'm just thinking about my head hurting me. Okay, so that's our 40 seconds or so. I think when we look at blood sugar, we need to be more honest. Instead of embellishing the truth and making up facts that are actually lies, what we could say is that our society is inherently enamorated with sugar, and it's become our inappropriate and not discussed behind the scenes cocaine laced orgy. So the first thing that happened was they took slaves literally and they brought them to Barbados, and then they brought them to the United States, and then they had them going between not just that there, but there was a few other islands and things like um, right off the coast of Honduras. There was a whole bunch of other islands, and so those slaves that came from Africa and were distributed and through the slave trade through the triangle, they were designed to improve the trade from the British East India Company with sugar, rum, and I guess there was a few other things, but mainly sugar and rum. Okay, and spices, right? Sugar, rum, and spices. And that's how the advent of sugar became so popular. And then all of a sudden, you fast forward, I don't even remember when this was. I guess it was in the late 1700s or early 1800s at the earliest or latest, I should say. But then um, the United States became basically the king of sugar. So we had more sugar than any other country in the world. We got it for less, and we started making it available inexpensively. This was a lot later. This was all the way towards the late 1800s, towards the early 1900s. So it became available to the average person in the population at a low cost. Meanwhile, in Britain and France and Germany and Switzerland and Italy, even though those countries have the most tasty sugar and sweets nowadays, much better than American food, which is nasty, the truth is that they were having to pay a lot more money to get their sugar for whatever reason, because they just didn't have all the sugar cane and things that we had in Hawaii and Barbados and all these countries that we were doing so well with our trade routes with. So anyway, so the America became the sugar country. That was our big claim to fame. This was way, way before, everything happened with everything being completely settled. We didn't even have electricity, I guess. And so look at what caused the problem is my point. Okay. Think of sugar as the problem. Don't think of it as something that's great. I mean, of course, if you're just imagining some chocolate ice cream and you enjoy it and you have that every now and then, that's a happy thought. But I want you to think an unhappy thought about sugar. Okay. Just picture in your mind something that's nasty, like some chocolate fecal material or something like that. Okay. Because the sugar is the cause of all of our modern diseases. You can't really pick a disease and not have sugar if that's a modern chronic disease. I mean, not like, losing your arm in a car accident. That's different. Or having a heart valve defect that you're born with. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, the disease that happens over a long period of time. That's what I mean by chronic. So our modern diseases, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and stroke and stuff like that, they mainly have to do with a lot of different things, but sugar is the underlying culprit. So that's what's happened. Now, the other interesting thing is we don't even have to go to such a old, we can go even further back. So I was talking about the slave trade, but that's just what it did to us. But before the slave trade, way before, about 3 or 4 thousand years ago, actually 10,000 years ago, that's when they started cultivating grains, and modern agriculture happened at that time. That was the beginning, the very beginning, I should say, of all of our modern diseases. So they didn't have in the fossil records any of our modern diseases like, bone disease and cancers and those kind of things, and heart disease and all that kind of stuff, whatever, arthritis, all that kind of thing. They didn't have those diseases before the 10,000 years ago. So it was about 10,000 years ago, more or less, that they started building these tall buildings. They had the pyramids in every country, but especially Egypt is famous for the buildings. And so they had wheat. That was the introduction of wheat. And in China, they also had pyramids, but it's just a hush hush. Nobody talks about the pyramids in China because, why talk about things that we're not allowed to talk about? But in China, they have the same pyramids, and you can see them from, like a Google Earth
aerial view.
Pictorial, aerial view or other ways. And so in China, they introduced the rice. In Egypt, they had the wheat. And in the American continent, they had the corn or maize. And the American Indians seemed to do pretty okay. I guess they had a very natural way that they were processing the corn. I mean, American Indians, all the way up north into what's now the United States. But in the central and south and Mexico area, where the Mayans and Aztecs and all those guys were, I can't remember the other group of people, but they were in Peru. Those people, they all died out. Okay, so basically they were planting all this corn. The corn destroyed the earth, the fertility of the soil, and they had to clear forests to plant the corn. And then they would heat the corn to a really high temperature that could then allow them to break down the lime and make it into they could make the bricks of limestone, and they used that limestone to build their pyramids in the American continent. So it's always been very destructive. It's caused a centralization of power. You didn't think you'd get this answer, did you?
I love it. I'm into this. That's good.
It caused a centralization of power with these pyramids all over the world, all the way back 3 or 4,000 years ago. But now we're at the culmination of it right now in 2023, where it's completely screwed up.
Mhm.
not just the United States or England or Germany or Russia or whatever. It's the whole world is goofed up because the entire industrialized world has taken sugar, which is the enemy, and made it their friend. And it's totally destroyed most of humanity. It's not the only thing that's destroyed humanity, believe me. I mean, it's not like humans are innocent or anything. It's just that we have these tall skyscrapers, and we don't just have them in the United States. We had them in, New York and every major city all over the world that's an industrialized city. And they all are pretty much. I mean, you don't hear about the little tribes in a little indigenous area in Africa or whatever, or China, and then call it industrialized. That those are the ones that we don't call it that. So sugar's really screwed up people's health. It's caused all the modern diseases. It's caused an abuse of power. It's caused humans not to work together, but take direction from somebody who they call an authority figure or a leader. I mean, I don't know. And then the sugar roller coaster is you giving your power away through this substance, which is one molecule different than cocaine. I'm not saying it's the
Mhm.
same as cocaine, and I'm not saying it's like cocaine. I'm just saying, isn't that interesting? It's one molecule different. So what are some of the differences? Well, there's a lot of differences, but the point is that there's some similarities too. So you can get a lot of the same kind of
Addictive.
stimulation of centers of your brain
Yeah.
with sugar or potatoes or fruit that has a lot of sugar as you would from cocaine. Not the same response, but a little bit similar. Cocaine
Mhm.
does something a little different. Cocaine gets rid of pain way more than sugar would. That's why a lot of the pain meds are made from a type of a cocaine derivative. But anyway, so sugar is, if I can't convince a person that sugar's bad if they're hooked on it. But let's just say if somebody's really hooked on sugar and they become one of my patients, for example, who has, I'm not going to say their name, but we'll just say it's a male who has, um, they have bipolar 2 syndrome. That's a person who's really going to have trouble giving up sugar because it's now part of their identity. And
Mhm.
so through the work that I do, and I've learned from others that were amazing, that were my mentors, like Dr. Viktor Frank and Dr. Robert Blake and Dr. Um, Walter Schmidt and Dr. Tim Francis and some of these people. They're all doctors, I guess, huh? Um, Dr. Scott Walker, who developed neuroemotional technique. There's like a spirit. I talk about it in my book a little bit, but there's a spiritual aspect to sugar. So sugar is a spiritual thing. That the addiction or the need for sugar is spiritual. And as we know, if we haven't been noticing, we should notice now, watching a podcast like this, where the person being interviewed, like me, talks forever and never gives the interview a break. But it's our society is spiritually inept, backwards, and dysfunctional. So there's a lack of love in the way that we're all treated and the way that we're raised. And there's all kinds of problems with our spiritual lives. There's nothing good or bad about religion, but it's the lack of a spiritual life with or without religion that's caused a lot of problems with our society. When it was the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Americans used to have this prayer in school. They used to do, pledge allegiance to the flag. They used to do all these little things in physical education classes that were a lot more spiritually healthy, I should say. And now that not all of that, but a lot of that's missing. I mean, now they're doing strange things like they're convincing people that men are women and women are men, or that they're the same thing. I mean, you can go from what people are calling a male to what they'll call a female, and you can get away with that. But if you were born a male and you have a penis, or if you're born a woman and you have a vagina, you're not going to change your genetic coding as a male or your genetic coding as a female. You can only just do things that are going against the way you were born. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's different than if you were born of one particular, the other sex. So there's a lot of confusion, and it's fine if we have these conversations as an adult, but it's
Mhm.
not so good to teach little kids these things, because even though I don't have any kids, I mean, that's kind of sad when the child doesn't know the difference, or they're confused, and they're just 5 years old or 4 years old. I mean, give me a break. There should be like they have rated R and rated different ways to rate movies. They should rate these classes too, and what they're teaching kids
Sure.
at what age. I mean, It's crazy. So that's, I don't know. I think that's a good introduction to what's happened with sugar because we already went through the buildings and all that kind of thing, the
Yeah,
power
no,
structure. Yeah.
absolutely. And it just spurs that sense of community. We're lacking that. If you read the Blue Zones or people gathering, the traditions of Sundays, just having that mindful time to sit around a table with family or loved ones. But this is something that I've always been interested in, and what I've studied is really the hormonal disruptors, xenoestrogens, things that we are breathing, the plastics, and how that is really offsetting our hormonal levels. And I was just wondering if you could speak into how would somebody balance, their hormones naturally? How can we do this?
Okay. Good question. It's funny. Like I came up with some of these questions myself, but then like when you have to answer them, it's a little bit different. So, since you do work as a nutritionist and you help people with lifestyle and speaking, you know that it's important for people to have balance. And so hormones are no different. I just think that our society is creating a forum for people to be sick, and those people who, and that's the box, right? So if you
Yeah.
have a box, let me just show you a box. If this is the box, or we could use my book as the box. I just like a blank paper, and you fit inside the box, that's fine. But if all of a sudden you're super healthy and you're making lots of decisions that are good decisions that are making your life go great, whether you're a male who's a masculine male and they have a deep voice and they're really strong, powerful male and everything's going well, or you're a very feminine female and everything's wonderful for you and you work at NBC and you're the lead anchor or whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is if you're saying something that is not part of the narrative, now you're in big trouble. And so the narrative is just that a few people have these hormonal imbalances, and it's too bad because women have hot flashes and night sweats sometimes if they have imbalanced hormones, and men can't get an erection, and it's just the way it is. And you can always take Levitra, you can always take Viagra if you're a man, and you can always, use some wild yam root if you're a woman, or you can do this or you can do that. Vitex, whatever. Vitex is the name of a plant with a
Mhm.
berry that helps some women. But the point is you're going to need to do a lot more than that. Okay. So if you're
Absolutely.
a man or a woman, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're not healthy. So, and the other thing that matters is that everybody has hormonal imbalances, even if they're really healthy. If you get a little less sleep than you need, your hormones get a little less balanced. It's not the end of the world. They can rebalance themselves, but we don't want to like not be educated. We don't want to not understand how this works. It's more important to understand it and to be able to do something about it and be empowered. So again, the book, there's actually two books in one. This the Skolnikov method, New Medicine for a New You, where I talk about the I have the inflammation solutions handbook that talks about the causes of autoimmune disease, thyroid disease, mood disorders, hormone imbalances, and gut health, or lack of gut health too, which would be um, a leaky gut. So hormones are affected by everything. So, it should not be as confusing as people have become. So if you eat something that could improve or uh, cause a problem with your hormones, if you drink something, if you come into contact with something, if you breathe something, I have programs to help with this also that people can use through the internet. And you probably have programs too. You can help people with nutrition. You can give them nutritional supplements to help their hormones, and that does absolutely nothing if they don't change their diet and they don't know a little bit about what's causing their hormones to be imbalanced. So if let's say we have a lady that we're talking about, and the ladies, let's just say they're 44 years old, right? And if this particular lady, let's call her Jane, if she used birth control pills for 16 years of her life. Well, that matters. Some people end up with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia or some other problem after taking birth control pills for that number of years, and nobody can help them except like myself and maybe a few of my colleagues or some other specialized healthcare provider. So because the cause would have been the birth control pills, we have to do the thing that Hippocrates said we need to do, because he was a pretty smart man back 2,500 years ago. He said the highest good is to find the cause. That's what he said. So we need to know what's causing the problem.
Yeah.
So if the birth control pills were causing the problem, guess what? We can't just act like we're watching TV anymore. We have to do something differently than that. Because if you don't do something different, and if you don't do something that's better than what you've already done, then you're going to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. The different result you're expecting, I wish I could tell you it's something other than what I'm about to tell you, but it is insanity, and it is a part of our community, and it is a part of our government, and it is a part of our world, and it's something that those that are sane want to fight against right now with therapies that are effective, that are documented to show results, and have done so not for just a couple of decades or years or hundreds of years, but for thousands and thousands of years. This is the original medicine, which I call now the new medicine, so people can pay attention.
Yeah.
So our hormones are screwed up because we've screwed them up. Okay. We've screwed them up with the water we're drinking, with the air we're breathing, with the food that we're eating. I mean, people are told, oh, some guy wrote a book about hormones. I have the book over here somewhere. Yeah, it's over here.
Oh.
Never mind the way I'm dressed. It's just special dress for. That was for dramatize what we're doing here. So John Lee wrote a book about hormones. He did it about in the 60s or 60s or early 70s or something. And what he said is, he said that there's something called progestins, and if you take these progestins, they can balance your hormones. And what progestins are is they're not progesterone, they're synthetic progesterone. And they did all these studies on the progestins, and they found they cause side effects. The truth is they don't cause any side effects. Those are the effects of the progestins. So if you take horse estrogen, which is like Premarin, you're going to mess yourself up if you're a human, especially, women are the ones who usually do this. So you shouldn't take horse estrogen. If you take human estrogen, that's going to mean now you don't make as much human estrogen. If you want to have your levels of estrogen go up, don't take estrogen. Okay? Because now you can't make as much estrogen, because the cell receptors sites for estrogen are getting filled with the estrogen you're taking. You want to be able to have your body make the estrogen that then fills those receptor sites in a natural way. So there are therapies to help. There's people like me who can help people, and there's people like you who can help people with their hormonal imbalances. Okay, but you have to know the cause. The birth control pill residue, the drug residue, I'm going to clean that up later, if that's okay.
We won't tell anybody. Shh.
The horse estrogens, and I'm sorry, the birth control pills can be detoxified from the body with therapies that are effective. We don't have to be reliant on herbs, homeopathy, nutrition, and flower essences anymore. We don't have to just be reliant on magnetic therapy and light therapy and sound therapy. We don't have to do that anymore because we have so many other therapies. Okay? But if you don't know that the therapies exist, which you probably don't if you're 90% of the people watching this, or 95% or 98% of the people in America, then you don't know who to go to, you don't know who to turn to, and you don't know what to do. I always say it this way, if you're trying to figure out who to follow, but you don't know who the leader is, you'll always be left behind.
100%.
People don't even know who they're supposed to be following. Are you going to follow the guy as the president of the United States? You can't put one sentence together? No, don't follow that person. Even if you like him, even if he's a nice guy, even if he's a good president, he's not good enough to put a couple sentences together. He should be doing something else. He shouldn't be the president of anything. You know? So Anyway, so the one that you're going to follow is you got to learn, you got to figure out who you're going to follow. Only if it's healthcare, logic and reasoning is a good idea. I mean, I don't know what that has to do with hormones, but find somebody who has the skills and training and results to be able to help you with hormone imbalances that you have if you want to balance your hormones. You need a healthcare provider, you need a coach. Evander Holyfield and Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan, they all and Stephen Curry, the newest basketball star of the world, they've all had coaches that help them to be great at whatever they do. Nobody can do it on their own. You need to have a coach. So you don't want to go to the health food store and choose that person as a coach. Find the best possible coach you can find. This is you. This is your health. This is your life. This is your ability to wake up in the morning, your ability to function throughout the day, your ability to think clearly, your ability to have good relationships with friends and family, your ability to be happy, your ability to sleep well at night, your ability to live a full and complete experience of your life is dependent upon you and your health. And so if you don't have it, what else do you have? This isn't a secondary thing. This isn't like, oh, we're going to go skiing this weekend. Let's just skip the finding out, which doctor to go to. No, this is going to be about as important as it's going to get, because your skiing days may be numbered if you get 3 knee replacements. I mean, or if you get 1 or 2 hip replacements. So you might as well make this important because you're important. That's what America's always been about. It's about, well, in some of the other countries also, it's about making each citizen feel like they can make a difference and that they're important, and that working on themselves is the most important thing that they can do. It's kind of like the opposite of somebody else telling you what to do. It's you deciding what to do. That's what made America great in the early days, whenever that was. So that's
Absolutely.
a big answer for hormones. Huh? So that's a good start, is to learn a little something about the structural things that can cause your hormones to be imbalanced, the chemical things, like you were talking about xenoestrogens. I mean, there's plastics that have gotten into the environment, and those plastics mimic hormones.
Mhm.
Sometimes they call it molecular mimicry. And then your body thinks that it's your own hormone. It might even fight off the hormone. If it recognizes it as being different, then it treats it as a foreign invader. It'll attack the thing that it thinks is a foreign invader, but because it's like the hormone, it'll start to attack your own hormone, or your own hormones, and that's what they call autoimmune disease. It's partly theory and partly actually what happens. There's kind of a combination of things that are happening, but it's just really scary, and that's happening for a lot of people all over the world. For instance, I'm over in Northern California, and in the Silicon Valley in San Jose, they had some of the highest problems with low decreasing birth rates of any other part of the country. This was, I don't know, this was more like 25 years ago. I don't know what it is today, and part of that is just because the water is so nasty and there's so many chemicals in it, and so many people were either drinking it or just filtering it. And so when you have a lot of chemicals that you're exposed to, however you're exposed to them, you
Mhm.
get sick. It's just a basically, it seems like it's common sense, but most people have lost their common sense. It's I say common sense is one of the least common things you can find nowadays, because
That-
people are taught not to have common sense. It's kind of
Yeah,
weird. So
absolutely. And this kind of parlays into the rainbow that I look into and speak into: environmental triggers, stressors at home, what we're ingesting and putting on our skin,
right,
absorbing that. And maybe you could speak more into, which we did kind of discuss prior to us recording, The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, because
okay,
I'm just fascinated how the 5G towers, does this have an effect on us on a cellular level? Because people, the viewers and listeners today, really have to know it's not just what we're putting in our mouths, clearing the muddy waters, trying to get to the root cause, but there are
right.
other factors that are wreaking havoc on our body in this new world.
Yeah. So what he talks about, Arthur Furstenberg, is that it's not that he's saying something that's so unique. It's that he did the research that nobody else was ready, willing, or able to do. He completed it all. So we got to give him credit for that. And you definitely should read my book and his book.
Yes.
His book is called The Invisible Rainbow. You just mentioned it, but it's, just aside from his book for a second, because we have a limited amount of time that we've talked about.
Yes.
I've noticed a lot of people, it's sort of like they're going through life and they're really busy and they have if you're a mother, you have kids, and I know you have a child. If you're working really hard and you're single, you got to pay your bills. Maybe you have to meet a mate or whatever you're going to do with your life. And some people are really focused on their careers, and everybody's kind of living their life, and they don't think, you know, okay, this is a phone. What does it do? Well, it has electricity come out of it. What do we do about that? Well, it's not enough for them to see all the advertisements on Facebook saying to put it in a pocket and then that'll help, some kind of like a lead lined pocket. There's more to it than that. So you need to understand that the world that we live in is a completely new world. I call it the brave new world of 1984 with a pianist and, Alice
Yeah.
Huxley's, Fahrenheit 911 or whatever it's called, 411. So that's the kind of world we're in where, you need to be informed. So if you're sleeping in a bed and you have a circuit near your head, meaning the electrical outlet is near your head, that will affect your health, whether you believe it will or not, whether you hear me talk about it or someone else talk about it or not. If you don't have lead paint on your windows and on your walls, and you don't live in a lead building, which almost nobody does, I mean, I don't, then you are going to be bombarded with all kinds of radio waves, TV waves. These are, I'm using layman's terms, but TV waves. You got the 3, 4, and 5G radiation. We've got the radar that they've been using since little after 1900, and we've got all these other things. So we're bombarded with all this electricity that's in the environment. Sometimes just a light. There's a light over here that I have. I have a computer screen over here. I have my cell phone. I have the circuits and the walls. And then I have a 5G thing a couple hundred yards over that way. I'm pointing that way. And, so all these things are affecting our health. And this guy, he's talked about it. He talked about the invention of electricity. I would have you, refer back to his book. But it's back in, I guess, a little before 1900 or so, right around 1900. And he talked about how they had this static electricity in these little machines, and people could spark themselves. And it was like a great, like a dinner time fun thing to do, right? And then when people realized if they get a little too much electricity, they don't feel well, they still thought there were benefits. And it's an amazing history of electricity. The problem was the biggest proponents of electricity of that time, of that era, who were all doctors, this may sound familiar, they ended up, most of them getting really, really sick, and many of them dying from strokes and all kinds of heart problems and things like that, because the electricity is so dangerous. And ADD and ADHD and these kind of diagnoses never existed at any other time of history up until they introduced electricity. It came way after 1915. I mean, it was way, way later. It was just in the last 109 years that they came up with these different kinds of diagnosis. So I guess you're asking about that, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so you everywhere you go, everything you do, you have to know the secrets. So for example, did you know that if you have your phone plugged in, here's the phone, right? And it's producing a certain amount of radiation. If I plug it in, hopefully the recording still works. Now I just increased the amount of radiation I'm getting by like 10 times, or 3 or 4 times at least. So don't use a phone that's plugged in too much, because you're going to get irradiated. The other thing, obviously, if I'm just using the speakerphone versus if I put it up here, I get less radiation using it as a speakerphone than if I put it up here. If I use a Bluetooth in my ear, I don't want to disrespect anyone, but please don't do that. So I've had a number of patients who get their ears are clogged all the time. They can't hear properly. And then as soon as they stop using the Bluetooths, they can, hear normally and not have their ears clogged. I've got, video testimonials of my patients talking about that. And it's interesting, like, oh, but Dr. Skolnikov, it's the Apple company. I've used Macintosh products and Apple products for a long time. I really trust them. Yeah, Leslie's talking about the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you may trust them, but Trust the science that's been there for over 125 years. Trust the real science. Trust Nikola Tesla. Trust Einstein. Trust the people who know what the hell they're talking about. Because I can assure you, Apple's in it to make money. Okay.
Absolutely. It's all about, yep.
We're not in it with Africa. We're in it with trying to get healthier here. I've been to Africa. My mother's been to Africa 4 or 5 times. Nobody from this country is in it for Africa, I can assure you. You don't believe, if you don't believe me, read my book, The Skolnikov Method, New Medicine for a New You, and see the movie called Don't Deny Truth. That was done by a medical doctor who found out about DDT and exposed the Silent Spring and what's really going on with the Silent Spring, which we were all told was a big deal. And that goes back to the xenoestrogen. Isn't that the xenoestrogens you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, don't deny truth is what you need to know about. I didn't know about it. I mean, I only learned about this 2 3/4 years ago or so, just before there was a COVID thing that happened, which is caused by the electricity. He's saying all these modern viruses each came at the time that they introduced a new technological development. First, they introduced radar. Then they introduced, I don't remember the exact chronology, but they had a avian flu and this flu, and then they had the, dengue fever and all this kind of stuff. And then finally they have the one that we all know, the SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19, and they just happen to have 5G at the same time. It doesn't mean that they didn't develop this nasty, chimera virus in a lab, and that doesn't make things worse. But I think if everybody's already getting really sick and dying from 5G, that they needed to come up with something. And that was part of like a plan. It wasn't just like this just happened to happen. It's like, oh, too bad. There's a new less than 10,000 years went by and there was a new pandemic. How does that work? How did the last one come about? How did this one come? Like, what's the cause of the pandemic? Yeah. They've always found that pandemics are caused by poisons or toxins in the environment, like radiation from Fukushima or 5G, or like from something having to do with electricity, or from pesticides or herbicides or fungicides or milicides or insecticides or emulsifiers, chemicals, whatever. It's always caused by something other than just like, oh yeah, I don't know. It's just like it's time for a pandemic. So we figure, what the heck, there'd be a pandemic. And, now there's a pandemic. Did you die yet? You die? Your cousin died? My cousin's dead. Oh shit. What am I going to do now? Like, they died suddenly too. In fact, they did a whole movie called Died Suddenly that nobody's watching. Oh my God. I wonder what that movie's about.
Yeah. It's just connecting the dots and having that light bulb go off. Like this is something right. We are just really, unfortunately, we're all of us are dealing with loved ones that have passed and whatnot. But, and it's really fascinating with just your background and all that you bring to the table that, like you said, there's so many triggers and why our bodies were not meant to be able to be this superhuman. We were not born on this planet to be able to navigate through all that we're dealing with today. So right. It's just surreal when you think about it. But I do want to ask you.
Exactly right. You said it. Yeah. That's what he's talking about in the book, is that we were born in a time where there wasn't a whole lot of electricity, and now there is. So I don't know about the deer and the frogs and all those kind of things, but I know for humans, I mean, we're in trouble, and plants and humans are doing really poorly. I don't know how little chipmunks and squirrels are figuring out how to deal with all this, but squirrels are getting confused. They can't, this is not a joke. They can't remember where they're putting their little nuts. They're putting them in the ground. They can't remember what part of the ground they put them in. I bet it has something that, I mean, why would a squirrel be so stupid? Squirrels are pretty smart. I mean, they're little mammals with fur, and they've got a brain, and they've got little hands. I mean, there's probably something going on with the electricity that's confusing them. Probably. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But
yeah, it has to be some sort of disruptors going on in our planet, right? So yeah. I think the more that we can just be our own advocate, right? Educating ourselves and reaching out to communities like you, that you could really pave the road to help people and not just, put our heads in a hole, because we have to be educated to be able to live optimally. And I wish more people will not get on the bandwagon of these quick fixes, right? Because these are lifestyle changes. Our body's a beautiful vessel, and we're not taking that seriously.
Right.
And so, but inquiring minds want to know, Can you share any hobbies that you have that maybe you haven't shared with everybody, to our viewers and our listeners?
Well, I like to exercise a little bit. So going running, going hiking, getting out. They have these things called the Whole Life Expo in the area I live in. I don't know how far around the country it goes, but it's like where all these kind of like hippie people get together and they go over like alternative forms of energy and different kinds of
Oh,
like
wow.
herbs and nutrients. And there's something called Pachamama, which is a group of people that go to Central and South America and India, and I guess they make their own soap and they have their own tea and all that kind of thing. So anyway, it's just fun to get out and travel, and there's a lot of things that the world has to offer. So it's good to find out about what is happening in the world by going out and partaking in what it has to offer. Traveling helps. If
Yeah.
you look at what people are doing in other countries, it's different than what they do in the United States. Like I recently went to England where I was, the Skolnikov method, new medicine for a new you, was well received. I spoke at the Royal Society of Medicine and Oxford and Cambridge, and the people there really take a lot of pride in what they do. Even if you're just going to a cafe and getting something to eat and then you're taking off after a quick bite or after a coffee or something, they'll like really wipe down the table very carefully. It'll be like crystal clean. Same thing in France. French people kind of have a little bit of an attitude, but they really take what they do seriously. They want your food to get to you on time and quickly, even if they're really busy. When they're late, they take it upon themselves to take responsibility for that. They want the food to be fresh. They want it to taste great. If it doesn't taste great, they take things seriously. So, I mean, I think Americans, no offense, because we're both Americans, but if
Yeah.
we were to take these details of our lives more seriously, if you have a job and it's not the best job, but it's a job and you're using it to make a small amount of money to do whatever you need to do, take your job seriously, whatever it is. If you're making calls or waiting tables or working at a bar, or you're doing babysitting or something, you could be the best bartender, the best babysitter, the best person who's making calls, and that can really make a difference for everyone. Like if you pay it forward, if you know focus on education in whatever area you're wanting to learn about rather than entertainment. We're brainwashed into thinking that entertainment has value, and entertainment is entertainment. I mean, I love skiing, I love watching movies, I love going to plays, but some of these things, maybe skiing is exercise, so it's different, but a lot of what I'm talking about is entertaining, but it's not necessarily teaching me how to help my patients better. It's not teaching me how to get my message out. It's not doing the thing that needs to happen for everyone to benefit, for me to have a better life and for other people to have a better life. So if we could all take it upon ourselves to become more educated first and entertained second. I mean, there's all kinds of amazing entertainment in America. It's the world of it's the land of entertainment. But why not be smart?
Yeah.
First, be smart first, so you don't get too sidetracked with the with what happened to Rome when they focused too much on entertainment. People were entertained by things that weren't healthy. They drank too much, and in old Greco-Roman times, they had problems. So I think we would have fewer problems if we focused more on developing ourselves and less on being entertained by everything.
Yeah, and just I think what resonated what you just said about wiping down the tables. I my the lovely thing about on a Sunday morning is walking down to my mailbox, getting the New York Times, the Sunday paper, because I'm a New Yorker at heart, uprooted here in Pennsylvania, and feeling the pages, opening that pages up, drinking my organic coffee with my raw honey, and just breathing in the fresh air and listening to the birds outside. That is so monumental. And that sets my day off into more of a positive outlook for the day. So all those little things, like you were saying, really has an impact on our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you have your morning paper, there's not a lot of electricity involved in that, right?
Right.
And so,
Absolutely. So
just
true.
safety, being safe. Sometimes people don't know how to be safe. We're taught how to do things that are dangerous by our parents. If we had two parents who had old ways of doing things that were maybe not so healthy, like I talk about my father in my book, those things impact us. So we have to get educated to know what is the best way to be healthy? What is the best way to be educated? There was no YouTube, 60 years ago. There was no internet 35 years ago. And so now that we have all these resources, we need to use them. And a big part of that is just thinking a little bit differently, trying to surround ourselves with people we want to be more like. We don't want to surround ourselves with somebody who's like smoking cigarettes all the time and they're complaining about their job. And I mean, everybody has their ups and down days. I mean, there's nobody's immune from that, but we want to try to focus on what we want, right? And what's going to help other people. Unless we want something terrible and we want to hurt everyone, we should try to become better and help everyone. So
Absolutely. And there's so many other questions I have for you, but I know time is
no
of the
worries.
essence. And I just love that you are taking the time out today, because all of what we spoke into is just so important for all our viewers and listeners to really sink in and to really think about their lives. But other quick question before we leave. Who is your mentor? Who is somebody that you looked up to that got you onto this path or journey as to what you're doing today?
Okay, that's a great question. Like I was thinking about that in the back of my mind. So I had all these, I don't want to go forever, so thanks for reminding me of the time. What happened was I grew up in San Francisco, and I never realized that San Francisco is a very different city because I was from that city, and I was born there and I was raised there. And then all of a sudden I left San Francisco and I just went to another part of California. I went to Riverside, I went to Los Angeles, and then I traveled a tiny bit, and I realized that wow, I grew up in like a really kind of different place. And so my mentors went from my father and my mother to this guy named Bill Gould, who developed this company that became the like 25th fastest growing company in America right around 1989, or it was like, no, I'm sorry, it was like 1997 or 1998. And anyway, this company that he developed got shut down and all this kind of thing, and made water treatment and air treatment. So I started learning a lot about the environment early on. But he was so successful at what he did, and he was so good at motivating people, that I learned success principles. So I got really lucky because I was able to distinguish between like fact and fiction in a weird way at a very young age. It kind of came with its ups and came with its downs. I was working too hard at too young of an age, but I also learned that there is a difference between success and failure, and success leaves clues. And there is a way to understand who you need to follow so that you know who the leader is, so that you know how to get the results that you're wanting in your life. So I went from him to finding a few other mentors. And one of them was the chiropractor I had. She was great. She was really helpful. And then I found another chiropractor. His name is Dr. Tim Francis, and he's like one of the best healers on the planet, still alive, still treats patients. And I just had a variety of mentors like that. So I've always tried to find somebody who was really good at whatever they did and then followed them. There's a guy named Jim Rohn. He died a while back, but he was a really famous like success teacher guy. He taught personal growth type concepts to people mainly in real estate, but also in network marketing. And he used to always say, you should work harder on yourself than anyone else. You should. He would come up with all these things that were like, well, that makes sense, but then like why am I not doing that? Like like I think I knew that, but like that doesn't like I'm not applying that to my life. So he would say, in order for things to get better, you need to get better. In order for things to change, you need to change. If you want things in your life to change, you're going to have to change yourself. The outside world that you see and experience is just a result of what's happening inside of you. If you change the inside of you, your outside world will change. So that's what he would always talk about. So even though he's no longer alive and I didn't even meet him, he's kind of like a mentor.
Wow. Wow. So
Tony Robbins was one of my mentors.
yeah.
Grant Cardone, all these Dog the Bounty Hunter is an interesting guy. I don't think I'd want to be exactly like Dog the Bounty Hunter. I'm not going to learn from his love life. He was married a number of times, but yeah, I've had different mentors. Dr. Oz, Evander Holyfield is a really interesting guy. He said life is about believing. Whatever you, and everybody's heard that before, but
Mhm.
I mean, he's a very religious guy. He always talks about his um, advice that he got from his mother, who supported him to be a boxer from as early of an age as 8 years old, and obviously went on to win all the national championship. He became the fourth time undefeated boxing champion of the world. I mean, this
Wow.
guy's like a more than a living legend, right? So his story is interesting. So yeah, I've learned a lot from different people. I think finding a mentor who's good at the thing that they're doing and following them at only that thing and not everything. Like, you don't want to learn about how to have good relationships from somebody who's been married 6 times, right?
Right.
So that can be confusing if your parents were divorced or remarried or whatever. So you have to find somebody who's good at that thing. You can kind of match and model them, which is what Tony Robbins talks about. And so this isn't something that just happens. You don't just wake up and be like, "Oh, I'm successful. I know what to do. I know who's my coach, and I know who to follow, and I know how to live a good life." It's like you have to study these principles that Jim Rohn talks about and Anthony Robbins talks about and Napoleon Hill talks about in his book Think and Grow Rich, which is one of the widest read books anywhere in the world, along with Og Mandino's book, The Richest. There's he wrote a couple of books. There's all these people that have put together this information, and so you should take a little. You can take a little bit from each of them, but just be careful of what thing you're learning from what person, because you don't want to follow the wrong person. Be careful of who you're following, because they may take you to a place you don't want to go to. So yeah,
A lot of interesting people, and that's so key. It's like an a
yeah.
la carte, and just take from what their strengths are and what they're really sharing to the world. So I wanted to ask you, was there anything else that you, first of all, would like to share with us? Any new secrets that maybe that's in the works that you could let us know, or give us a little hint as to another book, or where can we see you out here globally, and where you'll be speaking?
You can find me easily on social media. I'm usually I just go with Triad of Health is the my company name, and then I'm working on an information product that'll be available in about a month from now, and you can find that at Dr. Skolnikov. So it's Dr. and then Skolnikov. It's not the same thing as my whole name, but it's Dr. and then Skolnikoff. So the inflammation, it's called an inflammation reduction method program. So it's based upon the information in the Skolnikov method, and I refer back to this book quite a bit. And I think people would want to get this book. So it sounds like self promotion, and I'm definitely doing self promotion, but you
It's
should
all
know that
good.
it took about literally just a little less than 3 years of my life to put together this double book. It's like 722 pages. It's an interactive book that has both audio and video that goes with it, with QR codes and everything, and different kinds of websites, and refers to other people's books. And it's really kind of like, I call it all inclusive. It's just for the layperson to get a better understanding of what is inflammation, what do I do if I'm not feeling well. Well, now you know what you can do. We have programs set up for people. They can just go right to skolnikov.com or drskolnikov.com, and they can learn more. It's easiest to go over there, because then you have my link on YouTube. You could type in Triad of Health or Skolnikov on YouTube, and on Instagram, One Stop. I guess I'm Triad of Health on Instagram, TriadofHealth.net. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about getting the word out. And a lot of people are suffering. Some people, or a lot of people have anxiety. Some of these people are really young.
Yeah.
They're in their early 20s or even younger. Other people are just, they're getting sick, or they can't have a child, even though they're the normal birth age. And so they want somebody who is a puzzle solver to help them. And if they go to a regular doctor, I don't want to be negative or pessimistic, but I mean, I don't know. I just like, I haven't, I don't know, like, but, you know, you
Yeah.
probably, try it. Try going to a regular doctor and see what happens. From what I've heard, I could be wrong. I've heard that if you want to get insulin injections, which people need if they're brittle diabetic,
Hmm.
they cost a few $1,000s, like 4 or 5 grand. So if your insurance is paying most of it, but you still have $1,000 copay or an $8,000 copay per year, I mean, they say the average person in the last few years of their life spends about maybe 35 times more money on their health than they spent throughout their entire life. You know,
Wow.
my father was incredible. He was like this really caring, compassionate psychiatrist who just wanted to help people with their emotional problems. I guess he had a few of his own, like we all do. And so what happened was, for me and my brother, he put together like this way to protect us so that we were doing okay financially when he passed away. But he did it at the sacrifice of his own health and betterment because he didn't spend a lot of money on his health and he used lots of prescriptions and he went to medical school and they taught him that all that stuff was okay and that he didn't need to worry about anything and the government would take care of him and he would be okay. He just needed to go to the doctor and do what the doctor said. And even though he was a doctor, and what happened was he did live a good life, but he was this tough guy who at 84 years old, he couldn't think straight. He could barely walk up and down the street. He was crashing his car into everything and everyone. He'd already had lymphoma, type of a Parkinson's disease,
Hmm.
and prostate cancer. And he had the whole chemotherapy for a couple of those things and a radiation procedure. It just, I don't know what was going on for him, but from my perspective as his son, it was terrible seeing how he was like basically tortured by this thing that they call conventional medicine or allopathic medicine, or I'm calling it the old medicine. And he could have had access to the new medicine, but he wasn't open to it. He didn't ever want to learn about what Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about or what Dr. Mercola says on his website, or what Dr. Hawkins talks about in Power versus Force, or what my he just didn't. He just, it's not that he wanted to lecture anyone about anything, but he didn't want to do it himself because his mind was closed. And it's easy to have a closed mind when you see all the strange things that are happening in the world. It's easy to close your mind off to what's happening with COVID because it's depressing, or what happened to your friend's friend who's really sick or they're in jail or whatever. But I think we need to like keep an open mind because, maybe we can help with something, or maybe we can receive help. And if we don't keep our minds open, then we end up being in a lot of trouble. A closed mind is a little bit, not completely, but a lot like coming down, doing the skydive with a parachute that never opens. Your mind can only work like a parachute works if it's open. And if the parachute don't open, it's a not so good when you do the skydiving. You know what I'm
Great
saying?
analogy. Absolutely. That
Yeah.
hits home. Boy, oh boy. Wow. Well,
And I've done skydiving, and I believe me, I was happy there was a guy there to pull the parachute.
you
He
did
was
it.
right
Wow.
attached to me.
You are a brave man. That's something that's not on my bucket list.
You don't need to do it. It was fun, but it's like I don't think I want to go again.
You wouldn't do it again. Okay.
No, I'm good for now.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, please, Dr. Skolnikov, first of all, I would love for you to come back on as a guest on Keep It Dirty, because this is just the tip of the iceberg of all that you have done to help us, and these amazing books that I'm going to jump into because I really want to get to know more about all your research and all the years that you've put your heart and soul. And thank you for being a presence and helping people, and throughout the world and globally now. getting on these platforms and just having people become more aware and empowering individuals. So for that, I thank you. And for the viewers and listeners, thank you for being here today. Can you just give us one more time your Instagram information and your website so people can check it out?
Yeah, the easiest website is just skolnikoff.com. So it's my name spelled, my last name, Skolnikoff. And I use Triad of Health on Instagram. So it's TRIAD, like a Chinese triad, like three, and then OF, and then HEALTH, like Bounty of Health, but Triad of Health. So it's Instagram, whatever, Triad of Health.
Okay.
I guess it's forward slash, I think. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And to all the viewers
Thank
and
you.
listeners, remember, keep it dirty and take care.